In Mount Olivet, a quiet village hidden between hills and rivers, peace lived like morning mist. Beautiful but easy to disturb, David Grant came from Kingston seeking rest, a new beginning away from the noise of the city. The people welcomed him with warmth, and Elder Simeon, the village's spiritual guide, offered him wisdom and a warning. Keep your eyes open, son. Not everything that glitters in these hills is gold. Days passed and David found joy in teaching, especially through young Joshua, whose innocence reminded him why he had come. But as light always draws shadow, another presence stirred. Her name was Marisa, beauty and mystery woven together, like silk hiding a blade. Elder Simeon's warning lingered, but curiosity whispered louder. And on a quiet evening by the river, destiny introduced itself with a smile. That night, the wind changed, the trees whispered, and somewhere in the darkness, a candle went out. Now the stranger's test begins. Temptation has taken form, and faith will soon be measured. This is part 2, the invitation, where beauty beckons and discernment is the only defense. Desire has a way of blinding the once open eyes. What begins as comfort can become captivity, and sometimes the sweetest voice carries the deadliest secret. Days passed, and David's name became part of the village rhythm. Children laughed louder when he was near. Elders nodded in approval as he passed through the square. The young teacher from Kingston had found belonging, or so it seemed. But even as he settled into village life, someone was drawing him in. Marisa. She appeared everywhere. At the market, near the river, outside the school fence. Her smile was warm. Her voice was soft like honey. Her presence became familiar, almost comforting. And soon it was she who offered him what no one else did, companionship. It started with something ordinary. It was just a normal walk home after class. The sun was melting into the hills, casting long shadows across the red dirt road. David carried a few exercise books under his arm, his shirt damp from the day's heat. The air smelled of rain that hadn't yet come. The evening felt too quiet. That quiet kind of evening when everything feels suspended. And then he heard a voice humming softly, almost blending with the wind. He turned, and there she stood, near the old school gate. Her hands are full of leaves. It was Marisa. She wore a simple white dress, but the way the fading light touched her face made her look almost unreal, like someone caught between this world and another. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She smiled first, and then she said in a low and musical voice, "So you are just leaving school?" David nodded, adjusting the books in his hand. "It is obvious," she laughed. "In a small place like this, people are not usually this dedicated." He smiled despite himself. There was something disarming about her, something that made conversation easy. "I'm still learning the rhythm of this place," he said. "Everything here moves differently." "Different can be good," she replied, stepping a little closer. "Sometimes peace hides where people forget to look." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, it felt like the village had gone quiet. She tilted her head slightly. "You like tea?" David blinked, caught off guard by the sudden change of subject. "Tea?" Her lips curved. "You look like a man who doesn't drink enough of it. Come by my home later, just for tea." It was a simple and casual invitation, but there was something in her tone that left no room for refusal. He hesitated, sensing the same unease he felt the night Elder Simeon spoke her name. Yet her eyes were kind, and his heart, always open, always trusting, pushed the warning aside. He smiled. "All right then, just for tea." As he walked away, the last light of evening glowed behind her like a halo, or perhaps a warning. The path to her house wound between tall guinea grass and whispering bamboo. Each step David took felt heavier, as though the night itself was testing his resolve. He reached the gate and paused. Ahead, a lone house stood at the edge of the village, apart from the others, as if the earth had shifted to give it distance. Candlelight flickered through wooden shutters, and the faint scent of jasmine floated in the air. He lifted the latch gently. The sound echoed too loudly in the quiet. Inside, the home gleamed with care. The walls shone as though freshly polished, and every corner held something fragrant and intentional. A calabash bowl set on a small wooden table, filled with water and floating petals. Marisa moved like a melody. Every gesture seemed choreographed, her hands graceful, her voice steady, her smile deliberate. She poured tea into 2 small cups. "You must miss Kingston," she said softly. "The noise, the faces, the sea." David smiled faintly. "Sometimes, but peace has its own beauty." "Peace," she repeated, looking into her cup. "It's a rare thing, isn't it? People talk about it as if they've ever really found it." He watched her, the way she spoke, the way her eyes held both warmth and weight. She spoke of loneliness, of how people whispered about her, how she learned to live with the sound of silence. David's heart stirred with compassion. "You don't deserve their whispers," he said gently. Her gaze lifted, steady and soft. "Neither do you." For a moment, the world seemed to still. Even the crickets fell silent, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, 2 stories collided, one seeking peace, the other hiding it. The tea cooled, untouched. The air thickened with something unspoken. Outside, the wind shifted, and the candle flickered low. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Every invitation carries a spirit. Some bring comfort, others captivity. The night pressed in through the windows, whispering through the bamboo slats. When David rose to leave, she reached for him, her touch light, deliberate. "It's too late to walk home," she whispered. Her voice was soft, inviting, final. "Stay, David. It's safe here." He hesitated. Something in his spirit shifted, a quiet check, the kind only the Holy Ghost gives. A warning wrapped in peace. But he ignored it, and that night, he stayed. Midnight crept in like a thief. The village slept. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. David lay still, caught between sleep and waking. His body heavy, but his spirit uneasy. Something wasn't right. The peace he sought had turned strange. From beyond the curtain came a soft rhythmic sound, like a whispering chant. They were not words he could understand, but sounds weighty. He opened his eyes but said nothing. The scent in the air had changed. The smell of jasmine was no longer, but there was something earthy, ancient, burning. The flame of the candle bowed low, almost extinguished. Marisa's shadow moved across the wall, not walking, but gliding, and then silence. Outside, a dog barked sharply, one cry, then whimpered and went quiet. A rooster crowed once, though dawn was still far away. The night thickened. Something unseen had awakened. There are nights when the veil grows thin, when what hides in shadow begins to move. And for the first time, the teacher's lesson was not in the classroom, but in the spirit. By morning, whispers spread through Mount Olivet like smoke. The village was uneasy, eyes darting, lips murmuring, hearts troubled. Something had shifted in the night. Crops had withered as though touched by a hidden hand. 2 goats were found dead near the river, stiff and cold, and no one had seen Marisa leave her house, not since the night before. They said witchcraft had returned to the hills, and though no one dared say it aloud, the villagers believed the new teacher had already been caught in its web. Elder Simeon stood silent at the edge of the road. The old man had seen such signs before, long ago, when darkness wore a human face. He turned his gaze toward the schoolyard where David stood, tired, but smiling faintly, as though trying to brush away the weight of unseen things. After the service that Sunday, Elder Simeon sought out David. His tone was gentle, but his eyes held the weight of experience. Like a father speaking to a son walking into fog, he had heard the whispers, everyone had, and they all ended with one name, Marisa. The elder's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had lived long enough to fear nothing but God. He spoke of signs, of shadows, of dangers that hide behind pretty faces. His words fell like stones in still water, rippling through David's mind. But David was tired, and tired men rarely listen. He believed the villagers were jealous of Marisa, jealous of her beauty, her boldness, her independence. He believed rumors were just another form of gossip, and so, with a weary smile, he brushed it off. He chose companionship over caution. As days passed, David began to enjoy the companionship, the laughter. The conversations stretched long into the night, the way her presence filled the silence with sweetness. He visited her twice a week now, but with every visit, something else visited too. Strange sounds drifted through the walls, low chants that didn't belong to any church, whispers that grew louder when he drifted into sleep, rhythms that felt older than the village. David told himself it was just the wind, or maybe it was just tiredness or his imagination. But imagination does not cause a man to wake trembling, and each time he slept beneath her roof, some quiet part of his spirit pulled away. Night in Mount Olivet had a way of stretching longer than David remembered nights ever being. Silence pressed down on the village, broken only by the restless rustle of leaves and the distant cry of some wandering creature that should not have been awake. David had again chosen to stay at Marisa's home, a choice he told himself was harmless, though his spirit whispered otherwise. He sat at her carved wooden table, sipping warm bush tea, trying to ignore the unease crawling along the back of his spine. Marisa moved through the house with quiet, effortless grace, her footsteps soft, her humming low, her presence gentle and hypnotic. But as midnight thickened, something in her shifted, her sweetness softened into something else. It began with a whisper, a sound barely human, a chant floating from behind her bedroom curtain. David froze. This was no hymn, no prayer, no worship, and certainly nothing a woman should be chanting at that hour of the night. The scent in the air changed too, drifting from jasmine to something earthy, burnt, and ancient. His eyelids grew heavy as he lay on the couch, caught between waking and dreaming. Shadows crept along the walls, shapes that moved without footsteps. The chanting deepened, slow and animalistic, curling through the house like smoke from another realm. He tried to speak, but his voice stuck in his throat, as though the air itself had hands. Then came the sound, a soft scraping. It echoed from the next room, a sound like something being peeled, separated, lifted away from flesh. David's heartbeat thundered in his ears. His breath quickened, shallow and frantic, but fear held him frozen where he lay, pressed between waking and nightmare. What David saw next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Marisa did not stand, not in any way a human body should rise. Her chest stilled, her limbs slackened, and then her spirit, a pale, shimmering outline of her form, began to lift from her body like smoke peeling away from fire. It floated. Her spirit leaned forward, drifting toward the door, passing through it as if wood meant nothing. And then, she was gone. She slipped into the night as a streak of shadow that shot across the treetops. Her body remained behind, lifeless but breathing, as though it were only a garment she had stepped out of. David's breath hitched, his stomach twisted, his mind clawed for logic, for scripture, for sanity. But his spirit whispered a single trembling word: run. Yet his legs refused. Outside, dogs whimpered in fear, their bodies pressed low to the ground. A baby wailed somewhere in the distance, the cry children give when they sense what adults refuse to see. And inside Marisa's house, David lay trembling, frozen on the couch, his heart pounding like a drum in a funeral procession. He stared at the lifeless body on the floor, still warm, still breathing. He was watching, hoping for some explanation that might return his world to something normal. But nothing did. The woman he thought he knew had left her body behind, and the night had swallowed the truth he was not ready to face. The minutes stretched like hours. The silence deepened until it felt alive. David lay frozen on the couch, every muscle locked in fear, every breath shallow and trembling. Her body on the floor lay twisted, still breathing. He stared at it, unable to look away, a reminder that something unnatural was yet to return. Then it began. A faint rustle outside the door, a dragging sound, like mud sliding across stone, like something wounded and crawling home. David's heart slammed against his ribs. The doorknob trembled, the air thickened, and then a shadow leaned against the doorframe. It did not walk, but leaned as though whatever wore that shadow was barely holding itself together. And then the door creaked open. What entered the room was not Marisa, not yet. Her spirit, but now darkened, distorted, shaking violently, dragged itself forward like a wounded creature seeking shelter. It staggered toward the body on the floor, and David's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to scream, he wanted to pray, he wanted to run, but he could only watch. The spirit hunched over the skin, hands trembling as they reached down. A sound slipped from Marisa's spirit, a low, aching moan. Then she began to descend. Slowly, painfully, her spirit lowered itself toward the body, and then with a sudden, sickening pull, her spirit dove back into the body like water filling an empty shell. The body jerked, and the bones cracked back into place. Marisa's body convulsed as though lightning were trapped inside her. Her limbs thrashed, her back arched, her mouth opened wide, too wide, but no sound came out. The room shook with a force David could feel in his bones. Then, silence. Her body collapsed in a heap, her breathing steadied. Slowly, her eyelids fluttered. Her eyes opened, and she smiled. Not sweetly or warmly, but knowingly, as though she could sense David's fear of hiding in the dark. Marisa looked around the room, her gaze sharp, alert, like a predator checking the dark. Her eyes flicked once toward the couch where David lay. For a moment, he thought she saw him. For a moment, he thought she knew. Then she whispered, voice low and cold, "Another night, another secret kept." She stood, stretched her neck, and walked away as though she had simply returned from a nap. David lay trembling, knowing sleep would never come again, knowing the truth had finally found him, and knowing now, without question, that he was a friend with something no man should ever witness. Something not human. Morning crept into Marisa's house as though nothing unholy had happened. Golden sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. Birds chattered outside. A pot simmered softly on the stove, carrying the scent of thyme and boiled bananas. The house looked normal, as if the night had been wiped clean by hands that knew how to hide secrets. David sat on the edge of the couch, his clothes damp with sweat, his eyes hollow and sleepless. Every creak of the house made him flinch. Every shadow felt like it had a memory. And then she appeared. Marisa stepped from the kitchen with a soft, warm smile. "Good morning, David," she said, as though she had simply risen from an ordinary night's rest. Her voice was smooth and her eyes were gentle. There was no tremor in her hands, no exhaustion in her face, no hint that her spirit had roamed the night like a shadow torn from flesh. David stared at her, his breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. How could she look so normal? How could she stand there calm after what he had seen? Marisa set a plate before him. "Eat," she said. "You barely slept." He didn't touch the food, couldn't. His hands trembled, but she only laughed lightly, as though nothing in the world could trouble her, as though midnight had not held a horror too dark for words. "Rough night?" she teased. David swallowed hard. His mouth was dry. His heart pounded. "Did you hear anything? Last night?" His voice cracked. She lifted her head, eyes bright and innocent. "Hear what?" A beat of silence, then she tilted her head, smiling just a little too long. "Sometimes the night plays tricks, David. Dreams feel real. Shadows move, that's all." Her gaze held his, steady, unblinking. Too steady. For a moment he thought she knew, that she felt his fear, that she sensed what he had witnessed. But then she turned away, humming softly, stirring the pot on the stove as though her spirit had not just left her body to wander through darkness. David rose slowly from the couch, his movements cautious. He felt like a man walking beside a sleeping beast, hoping not to wake something he could never escape. He whispered to himself, "I have to get out of here." But Marisa's voice floated from the kitchen. "Are you leaving so soon, David? You could stay again tonight if you want." He froze. A cold chill raced down his spine, and for the first time, the truth settled over him like a shadow. He wasn't just a guest in her home. He was a possession she intended to keep. David knew he couldn't stay another minute. His heart was pounding, his palms slick with fear, his mind replaying the nightmare he could not understand and dared not name. He forced a breath, steadying his voice though it trembled beneath the surface. I should get going," he said quietly. "I promised Joshua I'd look over his homework this morning before class." It was the first excuse that came to mind, simple but believable. Marisa turned slowly, her smile delicate. "Already?" she asked. "You just woke up?" David nodded quickly, avoiding her eyes. "Yes, but the boy's waiting, and I don't want to disappoint him." A long, heavy silence followed. Her gaze lingered on him. Then she smiled again. "Very well, but come back tonight, David. I'll make something special." His stomach tightened, but outwardly he managed a thin, polite smile. "We'll see," he whispered. And before she could say another word, he stepped out the door and into the morning air, breathing deeply, grateful for the sunlight, grateful for distance, yet more fearful than he had ever been. As he walked away, one chilling truth clung to his bones. Marisa didn't question his excuse. She didn't doubt him. She didn't even seem surprised, as though she already knew he wouldn't be able to stay away. David didn't just walk away from Marisa's house. He fled. Each step felt like a release from a nightmare, yet every shadow along the path seemed alive, felt like they were watching him. His breath came in short bursts. His heart thudded against his ribs. Sweat clung to his brow. He needed answers. He needed truth. He needed someone who understood before his mind split under the weight of what he had seen, and there was only one man he trusted, Elder Simeon. Elder Simeon was sitting beneath the almond tree, reading his Bible in the cool morning shade, when David burst through the gate, wild-eyed, trembling, barely able to stand. The old man looked up slowly, his expression shifting from calm to deep concern. "David, what happened to you, son?" he asked, voice steady like that of a shepherd. David tried to answer, but the words tangled in his throat. "It's Marisa!" he finally gasped. I saw something no human should see." Simeon's eyes narrowed. He closed the Bible gently. "Sit, David. Tell me everything." David spoke in fragments, broken pieces of a horror he still couldn't believe. The chanting, the shadows, the lifeless body on the floor. The spirit leaving the flesh like smoke, the return, the convulsing, the smile. With each detail, Elder Simeon's face grew heavier, as though hearing a story he hoped never to hear again. When David finished, silence fell like a shroud. The leaves stopped rustling. The birds quieted. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Then Simeon spoke. "My son," he said softly, "what you saw is older than this village, older than me, older than your grandmother's grandmother." He took a long breath. "There is a dark and old story, one we don't tell children, and pray we never have to remember." Simeon's voice lowered, as though speaking too loudly might invite the very darkness he described. "In the old days," he began, "there were women and men who sought power not from God, but from spirits of the night. To walk in that world, they had to leave this one, so leave their bodies as if the spirit is leaving a dead body." David swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. Simeon continued. "They would rub themselves with mixtures, oils, herbs, blood, and use a calabash as their basin. Then their spirit would slip out, moving free to curse, to torment, to meet with dark forces." His voice dropped even lower. "The body stays behind, breathing, waiting but empty." David's lips trembled. "That's exactly what I saw," he whispered. Simeon nodded slowly, pain heavy in his eyes. "I warned you, David," he said quietly. "Some beauty is not blessed. It is bait." David leaned forward, desperate. "How do I stop her? What do I do?" The elder closed his eyes, searching old memories and old wisdom. "When a spirit leaves the body," he said, It must return before sunrise. The body is its only doorway back. He paused, then spoke the words that would rewrite David's fate. And the only thing the body at that time cannot bear is the anointed olive oil, salt, and pepper. David stared at him, shocked. That's how you break the power. If this applied to the body before she returns, she will burn in her own body. Simeon rose slowly from the wooden bench, the weight of what he had heard pressing heavily on his shoulders. Without a word, he stepped into his humble house, a simple board dwelling with peeling paint and the faint scent of anointing oil lingering in the air. Moments later, he returned. In his weathered hands were two items: a small bottle, dark and tightly sealed, and a cloth pouch tied carefully with string. He extended them toward David. "Take it," Simeon said, his voice low, steady, and solemn, "but use it wisely." He stepped closer, eyes fixed on David's trembling hands. "This is not just your battle now. The village is suffering. Children are falling sick. Animals are dying. And darkness." He paused, searching for the right word. "Darkness is spreading." David swallowed hard as Simeon placed the items in his palms. The bottle felt heavier than its size, and the pouch seemed to pulse with purpose. "God brought you here for a reason, David," Simeon continued softly. "Not to fall into a trap, but to break it." David looked down at what he held, symbols of both warfare and deliverance. Fear still clung to him, but rising beneath it was something stronger. Courage. The courage of a man who knows he cannot run from the assignment God placed in his path. He whispered, barely audible, "I will stop her." Simeon nodded once. "Then may the Lord go with you," he said, "and may his light guide every step you take from here." As David walked away from Simeon's house, the small pouch of salt and pepper pressed against his palm, and he felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. The sun was sinking behind the hills of Mount Olivet, casting long shadows across the path, shadows that moved just a little too slowly, a little too deliberately. Night was coming, and with it, her. David paused on the road, heart thundering, knowing that somewhere beyond the trees, Marisa was preparing for her ritual. Oils chanting, the calabash glowing once again. He tightened his grip on the pouch. The battle was no longer spiritual folklore. It was now his reality, his assignment, his fight. In the darkness, truth is about to be exposed, and every choice carries a cost. We have come to the end of part 2. The shadows are lengthening. The hour of confrontation is near. But one question remains. Will David have the courage to face what he now knows? Or will fear pull him deeper into Marisa's web of deception? When darkness wears a familiar face, how does a man break free? David holds only faith in a simple pouch of salt and pepper. But can that be enough to save an entire village from a darkness older than its hills? Stay tuned for part 3, where secrets break, shadows reveal their true form, and the battle for Mount Olivet truly begins. If this story has stirred your heart, please support the channel, like, share, and subscribe for more modern Jamaican parables that uplift and inspire. Don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the fire of faith, hope, and kindness burning strong across the world. Together we can tell stories that change lives and build a better world. Blessings from Jamaica.